everyone, and welcome back to the English Journey podcast. I am your host and Canadian teacher, Jasmine. In today's episode, we have two special guests. They are actually two teenagers who are 16 from Canada. And the reason I invited them onto this podcast this week is because teenagers are the perfect people to really explain what English slang is. So those who don't really know anything about English slang, today's episode is going to be perfect for you. We're really going to talk about what it is, how to use it, and we're going to go over our top 5, or maybe not our top 5, but 5 slang words that we think will be useful for you if you are learning English. So, Dylan, do you mind telling our listeners basically what is English slang?
So I think that slang is a very universal form of language and talking, and it's very casual and informal, although that might come off as very, not very well mannered, but at the same time it can be very conversational and pretty practical, to be honest, and I think it can be a good use in everyday life.
Yeah, totally. And I think that most of you who speak a different language as your first language, you already know you have your own slang for your language and your culture. So it is important to learn because these are things that happen in spoken English without us learning in schools, right? We use slang all the time without even realizing it. So I think that it's going to be really useful to learn. I have a question for you, Mia. Although I kind of touched on, the fact that there is slang in every culture and every language, why do you really think it's important for our Glish listeners to learn slang?
Well, Jasmine, to answer your question, I think that when learning any language, I think it's important to touch on conversational aspects of the language more than grammatical or written aspects of it. So personally, for me, when learning a new language, I think it's really, really important to learn slang and conversational stuff about it because it just helps in day-to-day lives and it helps in conversation with other people who speak that language as their native tongue.
Totally. It makes you sound a bit less textbook and more natural. So I think that's important. Let's get into our maybe top 5 slang words we're going to learn today. Do you think it was hard to pick only 5 English words?
Definitely. I think that especially in the English language, there are so many words that we can use. Just when talking about the 5 words, we used so many other slang words trying to decide, pick the top 5.
Yeah, it was pretty hard for us to even decide on 5 words because there is so much slang. But, we don't want to give you too much information. So for this episode, we are going to go over 5. And then if you guys really like this episode and you want a part 2, make sure to send us a message on our Instagram, which is @GlishSocial. All right, let's get into it. Dylan, you're going to start us off. What is our first slang word we're going to learn today?
No cap, and cap is one of the most generic and popular slang words out there. And for me personally, slang is something I use in my everyday life, although there's some slang that I just absolutely despise and dislike, and I feel like it puts a bad representation or reputation on a place or a person based on how much it is used. But there are some slang words that I think are kind of necessary to kind of keep things efficient, especially when you're in the right time or in the right place, like talking to your friends, for example, or your little brothers, your older brothers, your other peers, when deemed appropriate.
That's super true. As Dylan mentioned, different countries and different cities actually have their own slang. So where we are based in Toronto, we have actual slang that only people from Toronto use. So I think that's actually another interesting point. So Dylan mentioned the first slang word, which is no cap or cap. So cap and no cap are actually opposites. Mia, do you want to explain what those slang words mean?
So no cap would be like no way, right? It'd be like no way, like you're lying,
like it's not true.
It's not like there's no way that's true. It's unbelievable. So I guess
kind of think that's cap.
Oh. All right. So the experts need their own lesson here. So Dylan, do you think you can clarify what no cap and cap means?
I don't think you're wrong, but it's more like no cap. Like, the thing with slang is that it's almost hard to define, essentially, because you're just using it, and it's just natural, just like
it's
almost
very
like a muscle memory
contextual.
thing, yeah. But like cap is like it's just another word for lie, and then like no cap is no lie.
I think that with any slang word, it's very contextual. I think that examples are the best way to really understand how they're used, you know?
I like that.
So for no cap, I guess a conversation could be like, I won tickets to tonight's Travis Scott concert, and then you'd say no cap at the end of that phrase.
So it would be more used in an excited way?
Well,
I guess so, yes.
I mean, this is the thing with it, is that when you're explaining it like we are right now, you don't really know how to give an example of kind of when to use it, because you just do it as it rolls off the tongue.
It's very habitual.
Basically, kind of how we were thinking about these slang words, when we were literally using slang words to figure out what slang words we need to use.
These kind of things, you kind of only really can learn about them when you use them. So you need to kind of practice using them, and then you're going to learn, does it work or does it not work? Okay, so Mia's example about, going to a concert and then someone else responding no cap in an excited way could work, but this is definitely one of the harder ones we're going to talk about today. So don't feel overwhelmed if you're not sure how to use it right away.
So for cap, you would say, so let's say I said to Dylan, hey, I won tickets to tonight's Travis Scott concert. He would say, cap, or you're capping,
That's cap.
That's cap. Those are, it's another way of saying, no, you're lying. There's no way, when you don't believe.
Bottom line is that you'll know when to use it. In context or out of context, it means like no lie, but it might not fit in with what you're saying all the time, even though it means the same thing.
Right.
You just know when to use it. It's one of those.
And the more you guys listen to, English language media, so whether that's podcasts or movies or TV shows, the more you're going to learn about the slang. So right now, by listening to the English Journey podcast, you're actually learning some new stuff. So that's awesome. All right. Number 2 of what we're going to talk about is the slang word dog. So Mia, can you explain what does dog mean? I think a lot of you, this one might be the most common one we're going to talk about. So I think some of you already know this one.
Dog is, it's a nickname for anyone who you feel close to. A friend, normally you would refer to them as dog. It's the same as saying dude, bro, things like that.
Yeah, so it's like a close friend, a homie. It's very casual. You would never go to an interview and, call your interviewee or whoever your boss.
Dog.
Yeah, you would never say dog. But it's definitely something like, oh, me and my dogs are going out tonight, right? Just me and my friends. So
the dogs.
The dog. Okay.
Like stapled, Like,
yeah.
It's like we are the dogs.
I like that. So can you maybe put it in another sentence, Dylan, just for more context?
So like, what are you doing today, big dog, or like dog, like whatever. It's one of those words where you can use different types of adjectives to kind of describe, because dog is like homie, but homie is also like another slang. So then again, we're going back to talking about different levels of slang. So we go from dog to homie, which means like bro, which is also sort of, if you want to get nitpicky about it, bro's also a slang.
Right.
And then it kind of gets to just like friend. But no one's going to say like, what are you up to, friend? Like you're going to find a way to kind of show that you're close. That's just kind of a way to keep that relationship like intact and like show them that you're there. It's kind of like a token of respect, in my opinion.
Amongst friends.
Amongst friends, yeah.
I like that. So Dylan mentioned a really important point. You're not going to just say, hey, friend, right? You're going to find a way to kind of show that you do have a better relationship than just being a stranger or an acquaintance. Okay, so I have a question before we get on to number 3. I know that a lot of slang words sometimes have a more female or male connotation to them. So that means a lot of slang words are sometimes highly used by more males than females, or the other way around. Now, I'm not saying that the other gender can't use these words. I'm just saying that sometimes a slang word is more common and more popular with one gender. So do you guys notice a difference with the word dog? Can anyone use that word?
I think that a while back it may have only been used amongst guys and dudes, I'd say, but now I find as a girl I use it a lot with my friends, girls and guys. I don't know, Dylan, what do you think?
So for me, I think it can be used with anyone. You're honestly the only girl I know that uses the word dog, or
because
like,
I'm cool, that's why.
yeah, sure.
Okay, so it's not very common.
It's not very common for girls, because girls are more, I wouldn't say formal, but they're just more, I think, well-mannered, especially amongst themselves, opposed to guys amongst themselves. If it's a mix, I don't think that it's going to be used to the extreme that the guys would use it if they were together, but no,
that's
much
very true.
on
For
that,
slang in general, girls are more well-mannered, and it is less common for these words to be used amongst girls.
For sure, I completely agree.
But in my opinion, when I meet a girl who uses some of these words amongst their friends, I think that it's really cool. I think that they're confident enough to use these words, and I think that's also a really important aspect to any form of slang. Confidence is definitely key.
Mia mentioned something important about how sometimes using slang words can give you confidence. So I think that's really important to talk about, because as a language learner, I know for myself with French, when I am able to use a slang word correctly and I kind of like nail it and I'm able to say it and not feel weird, I feel a little sense of accomplishment, you know? I feel like I'm learning the language in a more authentic way. So I do think if you guys try out some of the slang, just don't be afraid to try it because it can bring you some sense of confidence if you end up using it correctly. All right, so slang word number 3. This one I actually use a lot, so I don't know if that makes me kind of embarrassing or cool, I don't know, but I know this slang word is used even among older people and young, so it's not just a teenage English slang word. This one is...
Cringe.
So Dylan, what is cringe?
So I think cringe is one of those things where you kind of look it up on the internet. It's not really, you're not going to get really a definitive, sentence like definition. I think it's just something that give you a weird feeling when someone says something or does something. You're just like, ew, like it's not a...
I think it stems from embarrassment too, on your part and on the other person's fault.
From either previous experience or just kind of knowing what the result of what they're doing may be, or any type of thing that just kind of, that stems from what they're doing, kind of makes you feel really weird.
I like how Dylan mentioned it's a feeling because I definitely have that feeling. Cringe kind of invokes a weird reaction. You feel a little bit embarrassed. Sometimes you feel a bit grossed out. Sometimes you'll just know when you feel it. It's a weird feeling where you feel embarrassed and you feel embarrassed for the person. So Mia, could you give us maybe an easier, because this sounds complicated but it's super simple, can you give us an easy example of how to use cringe?
Like if you want to think cringy, just think Mia.
That's very funny.
That's all you gotta do.
Yeah, to call someone cringe is actually, it's a little bit of an insult, but it's more of a funny way to say, oh my gosh, you're it's playful. You're so embarrassing. You're so cringe. So I feel like someone can do something cringe or someone can just be cringe.
The thing about cringe that I would also like to add before I give an example is it's very subjective. It really does not apply to everyone. What one person may find cringe could be completely different to what another person may find cringe. So an example of, I think, a scenario that this word would be used in would be, let's say my favorite song comes on the radio and I start singing the lyrics really loudly in a public place. It's really embarrassing. Someone could walk by and say, ew, you're so cringe, or wow, that's so cringe, you know?
Yeah, so for you, maybe it didn't feel cringe because you liked that song and you wanted to dance. So it just kind of depends on, everybody's perspective, but that's true that cringe is kind of just a feeling. So if you're feeling a little bit awkward and weirded out, sometimes something can be cringe. Let's go to slang word number 4. This one's a good one. I personally know that in my family, I have a lot of younger siblings and nieces and nephews, and a lot of them use this word. I personally don't use it too much, but this is a big one to know. So, Mia, why don't you tell us what is this slang word?
So, our 4th word is bet. It's simple, just bet, but it really... I feel personally, B-E-T. Yes, I feel personally that when I use this word, it really means that I am on the same vibe with someone else. We are totally on the same level. We understand each other. We're using this word to show that understanding. It's an agreement almost. You agree with what the other person is saying.
So Mia, maybe if I said the example of let's record our podcast tomorrow because we're very busy today, you could say,
okay, bet, see you tomorrow.
Which would just mean like, okay, I agree. Let's do it tomorrow instead. So it's just that mutual agreement. Do you have anything to add, Dylan?
For me, this slang word is very, I would say, diluted. I almost feel like it's almost part of my everyday life vocab. Like, it's just, I don't even think about it as slang anymore because it's not really because it's a short word exactly, just because it's used really frequently in my vocabulary. It's become an everyday thing for me, but, if I'm obviously talking to a teacher, I'm talking to an adult, I'm not going to use that word, but...
I think that it's so ingrained in our vocabulary because it's so common. That goes without saying with any slang word. You don't use it in formal scenarios. You don't use it in writing. You would use it maybe in text messages or in conversation amongst friends or peers, but you would never use it with, like Dylan said, teachers or parents or things like that.
I think that's super important to talk about because Mia mentioned you can use this in text messages, and that's really true because slang is vocal, but it's also casual in text. You wouldn't use this in a paper or an exam, but if you are texting a friend, you could totally use any of these slang words that we mentioned because it is casual, right? And we know that we text casually among our friends. And what Dylan said really intrigues me because it shows how slang can really become everyday life. So we mentioned how slang is kind of like those informal, casual words, but sometimes you use them so much that they really become a part of your vocabulary that you almost don't see them as slang anymore. So, for example, bet is really commonly used, and I don't think many would even call it slang, although of course it is. All right, we've finally made it to our last, but definitely least, slang word.
Blast.
It's not our favorite slang word, but we think it's important to talk about sometimes the dark side to English slang, or the side that nobody really talks about, the side that makes the English vocabulary a little bit
Vulgar.
Takes away some like
yeah, it makes the English vocabulary a little bit more vulgar and kind of gross. Yeah. So
In a real
That would
way.
be a
'Cause
good
that's
use.
also another slang that can be used.
it's true. This is normal. Every language has its flaws, right? So sometimes there are words where it's not a really pretty word to use and it's not very favored among many people. So this one I think is one of those. I'm going to definitely leave it to Dylan because I don't even like to mention this word. So Dylan, what is our last and final slang word?
Mandem. Mandem. Yeah, it's weird.
Oh god, I hate it so much. Okay.
That is cringe.
That is definitely cringe. Please, to all of our listeners, do not use this word. You will not get any sort of recognition for it except bad things, okay?
You will receive a
Clout.
bad reaction.
Just a terrible reaction.
All right, so we need to know. We've built it up.
Okay, let's elaborate on
What
this
is this
one.
word?
Yeah,
What
so
is Mandem?
Mandem is like the homies, but honestly, this is also another very subjective slang word, and I think, and this is also a slang word used where we live in Toronto, Canada, because, you know, slang can be very dependent on the demographic where people live, and I think this one really, and there's a few other ones that are used in Toronto as well that we are not going to mention today, but if you guys like the podcast and give it some good reviews, we might pull up with a part 2.
Yes.
So I think this type of word, Mandem, it really gives Toronto a bad reputation. Not reputation, but just a bad look, a bad image. I think it just shows the bad part of the beautiful city that we live in that has so much rich culture, diversity, and I think this is something that really just dampens that, and, you know, this is the slang I just don't like.
I think that that goes for a lot of other slang words used. You know, a lot of words that for some reason are popular, but they definitely do not have any validity to them. They should not be used, and I think that's for slang in general. Sometimes used in the wrong context, used amongst the wrong people, can come across as just totally useless and should not be said at all.
Make you look bad.
Exactly.
All right, so we mentioned Mandem means like homies, but I don't know, to me, so far, if I was a language learner, especially an English language learner, I still wouldn't understand why is this one so bad? Why is it so cringe? So I need you to really explain to me, why should we not use Mandem?
People using this word, I think...
You can use it if you want, honestly.
Of course, we're not here to tell you what
We're not
words
here to make
use.
the rules.
Of course, we are not here to make the rules, but I think that when someone uses Mandem or words like Mandem, it just says a lot about the person.
Okay.
It really is, it's a whole nother level of just intelligence. I really do think that you just do sound unintelligent when you use this word.
I think there's a lazy type of vibe that comes from this word.
For sure, 100%.
Okay, so using Mandem makes you
sure.
sound a bit lazy, maybe a little bummy, which is kind of another slang word, which we can talk about another time. But yeah, so Mandem just doesn't sound, I guess, proper, even though slang isn't always proper. It's even lower than low, correct?
I think the rule of thumb with slang is that if you know you're using slang and you know you're using it every 3 words, you're not going to look great. You know, I think there has to be some formality to the way you talk, regardless of who you're with, and that just makes you the better person.
Oh, I like that. So that's a little tip from Dylan. We have to be careful with using slang. It's not meant to be used every other word, right? Slang is meant to be used sparingly. So in the right setting, in the right moment, right in the perfect time, that's when someone's going to notice, wow, you just used that word really well. Especially if you're not a native English speaker. If you can pull it off and just use it when it's the right time instead of trying to use it in every sentence, you're going to go way further in your conversations.
And I think the goal of the English Journey podcast and English learners in general is to sound like you are a native speaker of this language. You want to immerse yourself as much as possible into the language. So using these slang words properly is definitely important and super crucial to your English learning.
I totally agree. All right, I think that was a ton of great information and tips for our listeners. I hope that you guys remember the 5 slang words. I will repeat them just in case you forgot, and then you can always listen to the podcast again to really understand the definitions. That's the beauty of listening practice. You can listen over and over again. So our first word was no cap or cap. Then we had dog. Our third word was cringe. Our fourth word was bet. And we ended off with our not so favorite word, mandem. Even saying that, it grosses me out. Before we wrap up, I do want to remind you guys to subscribe to the English Journey podcast, as well as follow us on our Instagram, which is @Glish Social, for daily English content. Thank you once again, Mia and Dylan. It was really nice to have a teenage perspective on the podcast. I know the past few guests I've had were on the older side. They were professionals. So it's really nice to just, have a different perspective, especially for our listeners, because I think it's good to learn different aspects of the English language. Is there any last thoughts, anything else we want to add before we wrap up?
Just for any of you, maybe more older people that are listening to the podcast today, the 5 slang words that we used are much more commonly used by the younger, maybe 15 to 20, 25-year-olds. Even small things like bro or yo or homies, or brother or something like that. That's not very, materialistic teenage type things. If you want to make yourself feel good, just know that using those types of words are just as good as using the words that we have listed today and help you maybe boost your confidence in learning the English language. It doesn't always have to be those 5 or the other trillions out there, because there are trillions.
Right.
And like I said, you know which ones you're using, so.
100%. And so that's why the title is even called Teenage English Slang, because this is definitely for the younger demographic. So if you're listening to this and you're thinking, oh, I can't identify with this group, I can't really use these slang words, there are so many other slang words out there that they don't have to be exactly the ones we mentioned, right? There are so many variations even to the ones we mentioned. We can even make a different episode about more universal slang words if that's something you guys are interested in. So slang words that are not just for teenagers, slang words that any age can pretty much use. Just know that you guys got this. You're going to keep learning the language throughout practicing. So don't feel worried if you don't know every single slang word in the English dictionary. We're going to get there together. Don't forget that learning a language is a journey. So thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next week. Bye, guys.
Bye.